Hello fellow coders, this is Pavel and today I'm going to be doing a C# exercise for rock, paper, scissors game. I'm sure we all know the game, so the rules are fairly straightforward. We know, when it's who wins or when it's a tie. So what we do need to do though in this exercise, in this particular one, is they want us to use certain procedures and certain conditions. So let's just jump to those. All this description will be under the video in the description box, so feel free to read that before watching the rest of the video. Anyway, they want us to prompt the user to play, with Y or N for no, obviously Y for yes. If the player enters an invalid response, then we should be told and allowed to retry until a valid entry is made. Now, part of the prompt to select the player's hand should include what is considered to be a valid entry, for example, R for rock. So it will be R for rock, P for paper, and S for scissors. If the player enters invalid response, again, he should re-enter until valid entry is made. Then the winner is determined. We know that paper beats rock beats scissors, and scissors beat paper, and there also can be a tie. They want us to use two classes. The main one would be the RPS game. The second one will be the program itself, where we will instantiate the object. And they want us to use at least one method, determine winner, and they want us to use one property for storing player's entry. Now there will be more properties and more methods, but this is the minimum they want. And here's a bunch of sample inputs and outputs. So we got the would you like to play the game. We will display the screen, and the user makes the selection. After that, we evaluate the who won. Computer's hand is rock, player's hand is paper. Paper beats rock, player wins. We will clear screen to keep everything neat, and that's really all there is to it. Okay, so I'm going to create a class like they want us to do, and I'll call this one the RPS game class. That's what they call it. Okay, now in this class we will not really need any constructor. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create some properties, but I'm going to also create some enumerations. Basically, it's like constants or array of constants kind of thing, and you'll see how they work in just a minute. But so to declare an enumeration is public enum, and I'll call it a hand, and it's going to hold the values rock, paper, scissors. So that's one. So we will be evaluating again against rock, paper, and scissors. Now what it actually holds is values of 0, 1, and 2. So I'm going to actually assign value 1 for rock. So we start from 1 instead of from 0. These will be automatically 2 and 3. Okay, so public enum, I do another one for the outcome of the game. And this one will simply say win, lose, or tie. And that's enough for the enums. And I'm going to declare a few properties. And first one that I will declare will be computer's hand, whatever the computer selects. And what the computer will select is one of these enumerations. So the property will be of a type hand, because that's what I called my enumeration. So it's hand, and the property itself will be called, I'll call it computer hand. and it's an automatic property, get and set. And similarly, I'll do the same for the player. Again, it's going to be hand because it's one of the enumeration types, or one of the enumeration rock, paper, or scissors. And I'll call this one player hand, and it's going to be again get and set. This is what they wanted us to create a property that will hold the player's choice, the player's result. Now, the computer, we don't need to do anything else with that. We will simply do a random number from 1 to 3, rock being 1, 2 being paper, and 3 being scissors. But player will not enter 1, 2, or 3. Player will enter R for rock, P for paper, and S for scissors. He will enter a character. So I will need to capture the user input into a character. I'll call it user selection, and this is another property, automated one, get and set. Okay, so now we can start the actual coding. Like I said, we don't need a constructor. Nothing is being passed into the, when we create the object. So I can simply do all the coding within the class without the constructor. The first method that I will do is determine the user hand, whatever user chooses, rock, paper, or scissors. So it's going to be a public. It will return a hand. Again, it will return one of these, and I'll call it get user hand, and it's a method. And remember, they want us to evaluate the user input. In other words, they only want R, P, or S as an input. Everything else is an invalid input, so we have to keep that in mind. So before I go any further, I will do another method, and it's going to be private, and I'll call it and it's going to be Boolean, and I'll call it to validate selection, for example. Now in this method, I will be evaluating the user selection, whether the user selected correct basically character R, P, or S. So I'll declare a variable called, I'll just call it value, and it's going to be a character, and I'll do it to upper. In other words, instead of evaluating whether it's a lowercase r or uppercase R, or the same for P or S, I'll simply convert it to upper right away and evaluate it against that. So this one will be the user selection. So that's the property, user selection. So basically it will return an uppercase character, and we'll store it in a value. Now, if that value, if the character that was returned does not equal to capital R, and the value does not equal to capital P, now notice the single quotes, because this is a character, not a string. So it's a single quotes. And the value does not equal capital S, and I'm doing capital again because we are converting to capital in this line right here. So this way I don't have to check it for the lowercase. So if these values are not correct, if it's not R, P, or S, then we will return false. Otherwise, we can return true. Everything is correct. Alright, so and that's all there is for this method. Now I can do my go back to the get user hand, and while the user does not enter correct value, we will be looping. So I'll do while and I'll call the method or the function validate selection. So while the validate selection doesn't return true, basically while this is false, that means that the user's input is invalid. So while this is false, I will clear the console, just like they want us to clear, make it neat. And I will do console.writeLine, and I'll simply write invalid input. And after that, I will do user selection. I will have to assign user selection again, and it's going to be convert, because again we are trying to get a character, so I'll convert it to character, console.readLine. Okay, now one thing that I'll do right now, kind of jumping around, but we need to display the screen, for the user with the instructions actually. So I will simply do a private, and it's going to be a void, it doesn't return anything. I'll call it screen, and it simply will be a bunch of console.writeLine. So it's console.writeLine, and it will say R rack and console.writeLine. This is P, that's the paper, and console.writeLine, and that's gonna be S for scissors. So this will simply display, the screen, and on the bottom it will say something like, make a selection. So WriteLine, please make your selection. Okay, so now when I have this over here, when it says when the input is invalid, what I'm going to do, I'm going to call this method, the screen method, to display the screen. All right, so over here I will simply do screen. It's a void, so it doesn't return anything. It simply outputs all this information. And after that, over here we got the prompt to make the selection, and over here we will capture that selection into the property called user selection. And again, we will validate it and see if it's correct or not. If it is, we can move on. And the way we move on is a basic switch statement. So switch, and I'm going to do once again character to upper, so I can check only one, and only for the uppercase instead of both lowercase. And the first case will be R. That's for the rack. If user presses R, then our property player hand, and now this is where the enumeration comes to play, equals hand, which is the name of the enumeration. Hand, I just named it hand, so it could be named anything, but if you press dot period, it gives you the options: paper, rack, or scissors. So this is much more readable than, if R, then it's equals to rack and all that, or do it with integers. If it's 1, then it's equals rack. This way you have it right here. So of course, let's break out of the next, for the next case. The next case is going to be capital P, and if player presses P, then his hand will be paper, hand.paper. Let's break out, and case S, and that of course means that player hand will equal hand dot scissors, and break. Now we don't really need default because we are evaluating the values right here, but I usually use it just for some catastrophic errors, so to speak. So I'll simply throw new exception and call it an unexpected error. something that we could not predict. Okay, now remember this method returns the hand. It returns rock, paper, or scissors. So we have to throw in a return statement, return, and it returns the player hand. So after this method is executed, player hand will be set to rock, paper, or scissors. And let me see what is wrong here. Validate. Oh, I need the parentheses because it's a method, of course. Okay, so this is how we get our user hand, and this is how we validate the selection. That's all good. So now we can do the determine winner. We have the screen here. I'll just move the determine winner here so you can see it better. So it's going to be a public, and this one, remember, the outcome, win, lose, or tie, is what we need to get. So it will return the outcome. Determine winner is the name. Does not need any arguments. And now we will simply evaluate whether the user hand, and we will evaluate the user hand or the player hand and the computer hand. So if player hand equals if it equals to hand dot scissors, remember it's the type of hand. It's like object, but this is not an object. This is a enumeration. So, but it kind of acts similar, with the period, and after that you enter one of the values. So if the user's hand is scissors and the computer hand equals hand dot let's say paper, then the player wins. So we will return, and we will return the outcome dot win, just like we do with the hand. The win, lose, or tie is part of the outcome. So that's that. Else if the player hand equals hand dot, let's say, rock, and computer hand equals hand dot scissors, like that, we will return again. The outcome would be the player wins. So we will return win. I will copy paste this, and if the player hand now equals paper and the computer hand equals rock, that's the third possible option for the player to win. Now, else if, actually, you know what, let me just paste it again. Else if the player hand equals, well, I'll start with scissors again. In fact, you know what, yeah, never mind. Scissors and the computer hand equals rock. Now the computer wins, so the player loses, so the outcome is that lose. Because we are doing it from the player's perspective, whether the player wins or player loses. So, else if the player hand equals, we got scissors, so we got a rock, and the computer chooses paper, that paper, then again the outcome is lose for the player. And finally, if the player has paper and the computer has scissors, then the player loses. So we will return lose. So over here we simply evaluate if the computer wins or the player wins. If neither of them wins, we don't even need any else statement, because again we have the return statements right here. So nothing is executed. Once the return statement is executed, nothing else is. So if neither of this is true, then we have a tie. So the outcome, we will return outcome tie. And this is how we determine the winner. Fairly straightforward, and it's very readable because you can see, paper, scissors, instead of dealing with R or P or even integers like 1 and 2 and 3, you know, for rock, paper and scissors. So I think this is much more readable. Okay, so that's how we determine the winner. Now we should probably play the game. Now, in order to play the game, I'll create a method that will be our basically game loop, and I'll just call it play game. And over here I will declare a boolean called game over and initialize it to false. Now we need for the computer to pick its hand, rock, paper, or scissors. So we need a random, because it's gonna be all randomized for the computer. So here's our random class, and or our object, a random object, and we will be asking user whether the user wants to play again after the game is over. We want to play again. So, and we will need a character called, I'll call it response. Basically, user will say yes or no. Okay, so now again we go to our loop while not game over. In other words, as long as the player wants to play, we will be looping. And what we do, we'll display the screen first. We'll call the screen method. Again, screen method simply displays R, P, and S, and asks the user to, enter the selection. So we will get the user selection, and remember the screen already has the line, please make your selection. So over here we will simply capture the selection, and we will do once again convert to character console.readLine. So y, we are capturing y or n, yes or no. Sorry, in this case we are capturing R, P, or S. We are capturing whether user enters R, P, or S. So now, when we have the selection, we'll call the get user hand, because this is the method that we just did that evaluates the user selection. It evaluates whether it's R, P, or S, and it does not. Remember, we made a while loop. While the user does not enter R, P, or S, we will be looping and asking him to keep re-entering the hand that he wants, rock, paper, or scissors. Okay, so we have our we call our screen. We assign the user selection. Over here we evaluate the user selection and get the user hand based on the enumeration. And now we also need the computer hand, which will simply equal to random.next, and we'll start with 1, and maximum is 3. So this is the exclusive value. In other words, 4 is not included. It's only 1 through 3. Remember, in our enumeration for the computer hand, we are again trying to get a rock, paper, or scissors, and it's rock equals integer 1, paper equals integer 2, and scissors equals integer 3. So when we get a number 1 through 3, we basically get the computer hand in the form of rock, paper, or scissors. But over here, this is an integer. The computer hand, like you can see that it tells you cannot implicitly convert integer to the type hand. So we can do it explicitly simply by putting hand as a type in front of it. So now the computer hand will hold paper, rock, paper, or scissors instead of just 1, 2, or 3. Okay, when this is all done, user made selection, computer made selection will clear the screen. So I'll do console so that clear, and now we will output the output basically. So our console.writeLine, and it will say something like computer's hand, and it will hold the value of computer hand. And similarly, that right line, this one is going to be player's hand, and it will hold the player's hand. So player hand. Okay, so now we have what we output in. If you look at the assignment, it basically, this is what it is. Computer's hand equals scissors, player's hand equals whatever players has. In this case, for example, is scissors. And now we have to determine the outcome, whether it's a win, lose, or tie. That's which we are doing over here, determine winner. So, and remember, determine winner returns win, lose, or tie. So we can simply do if and call the determine winner function, and if it equals to outcome, it's because it returns outcome, win, lose, or tie. And so if it equals to win, then the player wins. We can output console dot write line, and we can do something like they want us to do, if someone wins, it says paper beats rock, player wins, so something of that nature. So this will hold the user or the player's hand. So it will say paper, for example, beats, and this will be the computer's hand. So in this case, it will be, for example, a rock. And so we will write player wins. And we will, so again, this is the player hand is first, and the computer hand is second, because player wins. Else if the function returns outcome of lose, then we can do the same thing, you know, paper beats rock, for example, but in this case the computer wins, so the computer will be first. This is going to be computer hand, and this will be the player hand, because player loses in this case. Remember, again, we're doing it from the player's perspective. If he wins, then player's hand has to beat computer hand in order for a player to win. If he loses, then obviously the computer hand is stronger than player's hand, and over here we'll write the computer wins. Okay, else if it's neither of these, then it's a tie. So console dot write line, it's a tie. Okay, so now we are gonna ask user if he wants to play again. So we will do console dot write line, and we'll start on new line just to make it you know, a little separated from the previous mess on the screen, so to speak. So would you like to play another game? Yes or no? And again, we need to remember our character over here, the response, that we need to capture that again. We need to not again, but we need to capture the response of the user, whether it enters yes or no. So response equals convert. You already should know this by now. We've been doing it quite a while. Convert to character, console.read line. So the user entered something. Now we have to validate whether the user actually entered Y or N or just some nonsense. So once again, we go into the loop. But before I do, I don't think I wrote it yet. We need a method that will validate the response. In other words, it will accept only Y or N. You know, Y for yes, and N for no. So over here, I will do a method called validate response, and it will return true or false. So it will be validate response, and it will accept a character, whatever the user enters. And I'm using it this way because we will have to use it also from our main program, from our main method for the first time when we ask the user to play. So over here we will evaluate the value of response. So if, and once again, character to upper, the response not equal capital Y, and character dot to upper, the response is not N, not equal capital N, then we have a wrong response, so we can return false. Otherwise we will be able to return true. This is not because the user would enter Y or N, so otherwise it's return true. It's the same as we did with when validating the selection. If the selection was wrong, we return false. If its selection was good, we return true. So it's the same thing, because now it will return true or false. Now we can come over here into our play game method and do our while validate response, and we will pass the user response to the method. You can see that it expects a character, which is the user's enter, the user's input. So while this is false, while it keeps returning false, we will be asking the user to re-enter the value. So we will do console dot write line invalid input, please re-enter your selection. And we will of course do response. Now will equal convert dot to character console dot read line. So we'll be looping until the user enters Y or N. Nothing else is acceptable. So after this, again, the loop will not let the user enter anything else. So when we come after the loop, we know that the response is either yes, Y, or N for no. So if the response equals N, or response, this time I'll just do it like this, equals lowercase n, because it's just simpler. It's you can see that you can do it this way as well. You could do all these if statements, you can write it for both capital and lowercase, but I like to do it this way to uppercase, because instead of 4 checks or comparisons, now I can do only 2. But over here you can see how it would be if you did it both for n and lowercase n, and uppercase y and lowercase y would be the same way. So if the user presses n, then the game is over. So the game over equals true now. So when it comes over here to the loop, game over is true, and it does not execute anything. But before it does that, we will again clear the screen. So console.clear. So this way, if the user wants to play again, the screen clears, then fresh screen is called, and we go play another game. Okay, so I think this might be all for the class. So now let's go to our program over here and make it work. So player, I will declare a player object equals new RPS game, has no constructor, and over here I will do again a response, character response, because over here I will I'm not sure why they do it, but basically at the beginning they ask us, would you like to play a game, so I'll just copy paste that. So over here, console dot write line, would you like to play a game, yes or no. And now we got our response. So our response equals convert to character. It's the same thing like we already did before many times. So it's a read line, not convert, but console dot read line. So now the user responded. Now once again we can come over here and validate the response. So over here I will do the same thing. If player dot, and I will call the method validate response. Remember, we already have the object of player, so I have an access to that method, so I don't have to recode it again. And we will pass the response. So if the equals false, in other words, if the invalid input is being entered, so we will do console dot write line invalid input, please re-enter your selection. Now we are kind of using the same thing as we did in our game loop over here. We could have probably created another function for that, but whatever, this way it will work fine. It's only 2 lines anyway, so we will convert the response equals convert to character console dot read line. So again we'll be looping until user enters correct value, and the correct value is either y or n. So in this case, if our response equals y, or the response equals lowercase y, in other words, if the user wants to play, then we will simply first let's clear the screen, so console dot clear, and then we will call our main method, which is the player dot play, not hand, but play game. In other words, when the user wants to play, we come to our play game, which basically calls all the other functions and properties and sets everything up. So that's the, and if the user doesn't want to play, or at the end of the game, we will simply do write line, just so we know that we are exiting. Good bye, and console dot read line to pause the screen. Alright, let me try it. Let's see what I did right and what I did wrong. Okay, it's coming up, and here it is. Alright, would you like to play? So I'll type roll overcase y. Okay, let's play. Screen clears, and I have the options. I'll press R for rock. Now it clears the screen again. It says computer's hand is paper, player's hand is rock. Paper beats rock, obviously, so computer wins. Would you like to play again? I'll press capital Y this time. It accepts it fine. And I'll press capital R for rock again. So you got scissors for the computer, rock, I win. Rock beats scissors, player wins. Let's play some more. Let's try paper. Computer has rock, I have paper, player wins, because paper beats rock. Okay, so I do scissors, and computer has paper, I win again. I'm doing good. And then let's try rock. I want to tie, so let me just try that. No, I have rock, he's got paper, so computer wins. Still nothing. Come on, I want to test the tie. Oh, come on. There you go. We have 2 rocks, it's a tie. Now let's quit. No, I don't want to play again. Goodbye. And that's that. Now let's do some invalid entries. Let's see if those validations work. So I want to play again. How about H? Uh-oh, invalid input, re-enter. How about T? No. What if I press N? Well, then goodbye. Okay, so that works. And okay, so now let's do invalid entries here. What if I press F? Invalid input, make a selection. What about J? Still invalid input. I press P for paper, that's a valid input. We got the result. and it asks me play again. I press K, invalid input, and it says so. Invalid input, re-enter P, invalid input. Alright, so Y. Okay, now it lets me play. So I press S for scissors. And again, let's try H. Now, goodbye. So it seems to be working, but you know, feel free to test it much more than what I just did. But it's been already 40 minutes into the video, so that's all from me. I hope it makes sense how to use the enums. You don't necessarily need to. You could just simply, you know, kind of simulate rack equals, you know, if user presses 1, then it means rack. If user presses 2, then it means paper. But this way, you know, it's easier to read the code, especially when it comes to the evaluations of who wins, because it says directly, you know, what hand the computer has and what hand the player has, and it also outputs it, you know, in the words that we actually put into the enums. So, and the main play game loop basically plays until the game over, which means that the response is no to whether the user wants to play another game. As long as the response is yes, we will be looping and performing everything within the body. You know, we will set the user selection, check it, we will evaluate the hand of computer and the player, we would output everything. So this is the main game loop. That's what we call from our program as well. And of course, in our main program, we will evaluate the response, whether it's Y or N as well. We don't let the user enter anything other than Y or N. Alright, so hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Take care.